You know, there's a certain kind of sting you don't forget. It's not the sharp kind, like stepping on a nail or cutting your hand on broken glass. It's quieter than that. It's the kind that slices through your pride when the people you love most laugh at you, not with you. My name's Michael Grant. I'm 62 years old, a retired high school history teacher, and, apparently, the old man my family decided didn't belong on their dream trip to Hawaii. I remember the exact words my daughter Emily said as if they were etched into my chest with a blade. "Dad, this trip is all about hiking, surfing, and adventure. Honestly, it's not for old people like you." The room had erupted in laughter. My son Jacob had smirked. Brian, my son-in-law, chuckled nervously like he didn't want to be caught laughing but couldn't resist. And my sweet little granddaughter, Lily, she didn't laugh, she just looked up at me with those big brown eyes, confused, like she couldn't understand why grown-ups thought it was funny to call me too old. But I laughed along. That's what you do when you're the butt of the family joke. You laugh to keep your dignity, to make sure no one sees how much it burns. I nodded, smiled, and even managed to make a half-joke of my own. "Old people? Emily, I can still walk faster than your brother when there's free food involved." That got a roar out of Jacob, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd turned it around. But the damage was done. The label was already stuck to me like glue, the old man who couldn't keep up. Now, here's the thing. I wasn't angry at them, not really. I understood where they were coming from. I don't have the knees I used to. I don't bench press weights anymore. My adventures are smaller these days, fixing up my garden, taking long walks through the park, losing myself in history books. But just because I don't live on a skateboard or run triathlons doesn't mean I'm finished. Not by a long shot, and that's where the story really begins. Because while my family laughed and planned their Hawaiian adventure without me, I made a different plan. One they didn't see coming. Before I tell you what I did, let me set the stage a little more. My daughter Emily, she's always been the leader of the pack. Smart, sharp-tongued, the kind of person who doesn't think twice before making a decision. Her husband Brian is a good man, but he tends to follow her lead. My son Jacob is the adventurous one, always looking for the next thrill, but he's quick to roll with the majority. And then there's Lily, 8 years old, full of innocence, the only one who doesn't see me as old, just as Grandpa. So when they decided on Hawaii, I was happy for them, at first, until I realized I wasn't invited. Until I heard Emily whisper to Brian one night after dinner, "It'll be easier without Dad slowing us down." That's when the quiet sting turned into something else, something stronger, not anger, but determination. I may be 62, but I wasn't about to sit at home watching them send postcards from paradise. If they wanted an adventure without me, fine, but I was about to show them that this old man still knew how to make a splash. So here's the hook, the moment that flips the whole story upside down. While my family checked into their budget-friendly double room at the resort in Maui, I was already unpacking my suitcase in the presidential suite, the kind of room with its own infinity pool, panoramic ocean view, and enough space to fit half the guests in the building. And the look on their faces when they saw me? That's what you're here for. Because they didn't just see their dad or their grandpa anymore, they saw a man they had underestimated. This isn't just a story about Hawaii. It's a story about pride, about proving people wrong, and about reminding your family, and maybe even yourself, that life isn't done with you just because your hair's gone gray. So, stick with me. Because if you've ever been told you're too old, too weak, or not enough, you're going to want to hear how I turned that insult into the greatest surprise of my life. Retirement is supposed to feel like freedom. People imagine fishing trips, golf courses, and long afternoons with nothing but a good book and a cool drink. And for a while, it did feel that way. I'd spent nearly 4 decades teaching American history at the local high school, watching classes of teenagers roll in every year, each group convinced they were the smartest, funniest, most rebellious bunch the world had ever seen. I loved it. The debates, the eye rolls, even the pranks, they all gave me purpose. But when I finally turned in my keys and handed over my classroom, the silence at home was deafening. At 62, my mornings were slower. I'd rise early, fix myself black coffee, and walk out to tend the small vegetable garden in my backyard. The tomatoes, the cucumbers, the peppers, they didn't talk back, but they gave me something to nurture. I tried to stay busy, a walk around the neighborhood, trips to the library, even volunteering at the local museum from time to time, where I'd give tours about the Civil War or the founding of our town. People would nod politely, smile, maybe ask a question or two, and I'd feel useful again for a little while. But the truth was, my life had started to shrink. The house felt bigger since my wife, Carol, passed away 5 years ago. My daughter, Emily, and son, Jacob, had their own families and careers, their own schedules that didn't leave much room for Dad. I never blamed them for that. It's the natural course of things. Children grow, they fly, and parents are left with the echoes. Still, nothing filled me with more joy than the weekends when they all came together for Sunday dinner. I'd spend half the day preparing the roast chicken or a big pot of chili, setting the table just so, and waiting for the sound of Emily's SUV pulling into the driveway. That was my stage, my moment to feel like the head of the family again. Emily, my oldest, is sharp as a blade. At 32, she's the kind of woman who commands any room she walks into. She's organized, ambitious, sometimes a little too quick with her judgments, but she's always meant well. Her husband, Brian, is a good man, steady, dependable, the kind of guy who makes sure the bills are paid on time. He doesn't always stand up to Emily's strong will, but I can tell he respects me. Jacob, my youngest, is 28. He's the free spirit, the one who still talks about climbing mountains and trying bungee jumping one of these days. He's a good kid, though sometimes he acts like he's still in college instead of pushing 30. He and Emily argue now and then, but he usually gives in. And then there's Lily. Sweet little Lily, my 8-year-old granddaughter. She's the glue that binds us all. When she runs through my front door yelling, "Grandpa," and throws her arms around me, the years melt away. She doesn't see wrinkles or slower steps. To her, I'm invincible. I'm her partner in building Lego castles and sneaking extra cookies before bed. That's why the Sunday they first mentioned Hawaii stung so deeply. We'd just finished dinner. The plates were stacked, the laughter was fading, and I was pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. Emily leaned back in her chair, glowing with excitement. "So, we've been planning something big," she announced. "We're going to Hawaii this summer." Jacob found this amazing deal on flights. Jacob grinned like a teenager showing off a prank. Brian nodded in agreement. I smiled, expecting the next words to be, "And of course, Dad, you're coming too." But that invitation never came. Instead, Emily gave me a quick glance and added, almost as an afterthought, "It's going to be a really active trip, Dad. Hiking, surfing, maybe even ziplining. Honestly, I think it's not really for older people." The word hit like a punch. Older people. I forced a laugh, masking the sudden weight in my chest. "Older? Emily, I've been climbing stairs longer than you've been alive. I can handle a hill or two, Suba," Jacob smirked. "Yeah, but can you handle a surfboard, Dad? You'd probably show us all up." They laughed and I smiled, but inside I was shrinking. I wanted to remind them that I wasn't always this gray-haired man they saw. I was the dad who carried Emily on his shoulders at the county fair, the dad who taught Jacob how to ride a bike, the husband who once drove his wife across the country just to watch the sunrise in the Grand Canyon. But no one said those things. No one remembered them the way I did. That night, after they left, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the leftover chili cooling in the pot. The silence returned, heavier than before. I told myself they didn't mean harm, that they were just thinking of convenience, but the truth was plain. They no longer saw me as someone capable of adventure. And that realization, it hurt more than I wanted to admit. The more I tried to shake off Emily's words, the heavier they grew inside me. It's not really for older people. The sentence replayed in my head like a broken record. I'd hear it when I watered the garden in the morning, when I walked through the quiet halls of the house, even when I drifted off to sleep in the creaky armchair by the TV. I told myself not to take it personally. They didn't mean it with malice. Maybe they thought they were protecting me. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't the trip itself that hurt me most. It was the fact that my family, my own children, had stopped seeing me as someone capable. I wasn't Dad anymore. I was just the old man. One evening, I overheard them whispering in the living room after dinner. I'd stepped out to grab a tray of cookies from the kitchen, and as I walked back, I froze when I heard Emily's voice, hushed but sharp. "It'll be easier without Dad slowing us down." "You know how he gets tired," Brian's voice followed, low and uncertain. "Yeah, it's a long trip. He might not enjoy it anyway." I stood there in the dark hallway, the tray of cookies trembling in my hands. Easier without me. Not fun for me. They weren't talking about Hawaii anymore. They were talking about my place in their lives. I quietly set the cookies on the counter, retreated to my room, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo of Carol on the nightstand. She was smiling, arms wrapped around me from years ago during one of our road trips. Her eyes seemed to say, "Don't let them box you in." That's when something changed inside me. The sting hardened into resolve. I wasn't going to sit at home while they lived out some adventure, laughing at my expense. If they thought I couldn't keep up, fine. But they were going to learn that this old man still had a few surprises left in him. The decision was simple, but the execution required planning. The very next morning, while sipping my coffee, I opened my laptop and started researching flights. If they wanted Hawaii, then Hawaii it would be. I'd never been there myself. Carol and I had always talked about it, dreamed of it, but life had gotten in the way. Now, the opportunity was staring me in the face. The prices made me wince at first. Retirement checks only stretch so far, and I wasn't about to blow my savings on a whim. But then I saw it. The presidential suite at a luxury resort in Maui. Oceanfront view, private balcony, infinity pool, the works. The cost was outrageous, more than my first car had been, but in that moment, it wasn't about money. It was about dignity. It was about making a statement. And suddenly, I could picture it. The look on Emily's face when she realized I wasn't just there in Hawaii, but living larger than all of them. The shock, the disbelief, the grudging respect. That image alone was worth every penny. For the next few days, I played the role of the quiet, agreeable father. I listened as they talked about their flight times, their modest hotel rooms, their plans for snorkeling and luau's. I nodded, smiled, even cracked a joke or two. Meanwhile, inside, I was buzzing with anticipation. Jacob asked me one night, "Dad, are you sure you won't feel left out while we're gone?" I grinned. "Don't worry about me, son. I'll find a way to keep myself busy if only he knew." The closer their departure date came, the more the tension built. Every time Emily texted me a reminder about feeding their dog while they were away, or Lily asked if I'd miss her, my resolve grew stronger. I wasn't just going to Hawaii, I was going to reclaim the part of myself they'd forgotten. Packing was almost comical. I dug out an old suitcase, stuffed in some polo shirts, a couple pairs of shorts, and sandals I hadn't worn since Carol and I went to Florida years ago. My passport felt heavy in my hand, like a ticket not just to Hawaii but to proving a point. The night before the flight, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding like I was a teenager sneaking out for the first time. I imagined the plane ride, the warm Hawaiian air, and the moment I'd step into that presidential suite. This wasn't just a vacation anymore. This was a mission. A mission to show my family that I wasn't invisible, that my story wasn't over. And as I zipped up my suitcase and set it by the door, I whispered to myself, "They think they left me behind. They have no idea what's coming." The morning of my family's flight, I played the part of the dutiful dad. Emily stopped by to drop off their dog, Baxter, along with a long list of instructions. She was in her usual hurry, rattling them off like a drill sergeant. "Don't forget his medicine in the morning, Dad. And don't feed him too many treats. He'll act like he's starving, but he's fine. Oh, and water the plants, okay?" I nodded, smiling the whole time. "Got it, General. Baxter will be healthier than when you left him." She chuckled, kissed me on the cheek, and rushed out the door. Jacob gave me a wave as he loaded the last suitcase into Emily's SUV. Lily ran over and wrapped her arms around me, her voice soft in my ear. "I'll miss you, Grandpa." I hugged her tight, fighting back the guilt that maybe, just maybe, I should have told them the truth. But no, I had to follow through. This wasn't just about being in Hawaii. It was about showing them that I wasn't done living. As their car pulled away, I stood in the driveway, waving like the doting father they thought they were leaving behind. The moment they turned the corner, I grabbed my suitcase from the garage, hailed a cab, and headed to the airport. That's when the adrenaline kicked in. I felt like a teenager sneaking out past curfew. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror as I grinned to myself, probably wondering what an old man was doing heading to the airport alone with such a mischievous look on his face. "Vacation?" he asked. "Something like that," I replied, eyes twinkling. "An adventure." At the airport, I moved slowly but deliberately through security, clutching my boarding pass like it was a winning lottery ticket. Every step toward the gate was a step closer to reclaiming my pride. When I boarded the plane and found my seat, I settled in with a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt alive, buzzing with anticipation. The roar of the engines as we lifted off wasn't just noise, it was a declaration. Michael Grant was back in the game. Hours later, when the wheels touched down in Maui, I felt the warm air rush into the cabin the moment the door opened. The scent of salt water and blooming flowers filled my lungs, and I couldn't help but smile. So, this is what they thought I couldn't handle? I collected my bag and headed straight for the resort shuttle. When I stepped out at the entrance of the Royal Maui Resort, I froze for a moment, taking it all in. Towering palm trees swayed in the breeze. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of me, and the grand lobby sparkled with polished marble floors and chandeliers shaped like seashells. I walked up to the front desk, trying to look casual but feeling like James Bond about to reveal a fake passport. The concierge, a young woman with a bright smile, greeted me. "Welcome, Mr. Grant. We've been expecting you. Your presidential suite is ready." I nearly laughed out loud, my presidential suite. The words had a ring to them I could get used to. She handed me a key card and personally escorted me upstairs. When the doors opened, I stepped into what felt like another world. The suite was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the turquoise ocean. A private infinity pool stretched across the balcony, glittering in the afternoon sun. The living room was larger than my entire house. And the bed? It looked like it belonged to royalty. I dropped my suitcase, walked straight to the balcony, and leaned against the railing. Below, tourists splashed in the pool, and children built sandcastles on the beach. I could see where the budget rooms were located. Small balconies stacked together like boxes. Somewhere down there, my family would soon be checking in, and I'd be waiting. The next day, I made sure everything was in place. I scheduled a massage in the spa, ordered room service just to marvel at the silver trays, and even practiced what I might say when I revealed myself. Would I go with humor? Surprise! The old man's not so old after all. Or keep it cool. Didn't expect to see me here, did you? I rehearsed lines in front of the mirror like an actor preparing for opening night. My reflection smirked back at me, reminding me that this wasn't just about theatrics, it was about proving to myself that I still had fire left. That evening, as I lounged on the balcony with a cold drink in hand, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in orange and pink. I felt the anticipation rising again. Tomorrow, they'd arrive. Tomorrow, the surprise would begin. And tomorrow, my family would finally see me, Not as a burden, not as too old, but as the man who could still steal the show. I'll never forget the way the ocean looked that morning. The waves rolled in, slow and steady, glowing under the Hawaiian sun like molten glass. From my balcony in the presidential suite, I could see the resort lobby below, bustling with families dragging suitcases and couples in wide-brimmed hats. My heart thudded in my chest as I scanned the crowd. And then, there they were. Emily marched through the automatic doors first, her usual no-nonsense stride, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Brian trailed behind, tugging at the handle of an overstuffed suitcase. Jacob sauntered in last, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. But it was Lily who spotted me. She wasn't supposed to yet. She was supposed to walk past with the others, completely unaware that her grandpa was watching from above like some secret agent in paradise. But her sharp little eyes caught me leaning over the railing. "Grandpa?" Her voice rang out like a bell, high and clear. All three adults froze. Emily whipped her head around, frowning as if she couldn't trust her own daughter's voice. Jacob squinted up at the balcony, and Brian, well, he just stood there, jaw slack. I lifted my hand and waved casually like I'd just run into them at the grocery store. "Welcome to Maui," I called down, grinning. For a second, the world seemed to stop. Emily blinked once, twice. Then she stammered, "Dad? What? What are you doing here?" I leaned on the railing, savoring the moment. "Well, sweetheart, I figured if I was too old for hiking and surfing, I might as well come and enjoy the view from the top." Jacob burst out laughing, his voice echoing through the lobby. "You've got to be kidding me. Dad's here, in Maui?" Brian rubbed the back of his neck, clearly caught between shock and amusement. "This is unbelievable." But Emily just stood there, speechless. The concierge, who had escorted me to my suite the day before, suddenly appeared by their side. With perfect timing, she smiled and said, "Mr. E. Grant has already checked into the presidential suite. Right this way, I swear." The look on Emily's face was worth every penny I'd spent. They followed the concierge upstairs, Lily tugging her mother's hand with excitement. When the door opened, they walked into my suite like explorers stepping into a lost palace. Emily's jaw practically hit the floor as her eyes darted across the marble floors, the grand living room, and the private infinity pool shimmering in the sunlight. Jacob whistled low. "Dad, this place is insane." Brian laughed nervously. "You're living better than all of us put together." Lily bolted straight for me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "I knew you'd come, Grandpa," she shouted, her voice muffled against my shirt. I held her tight, my throat tightening. In that moment, all the planning, all the secrecy, all the determination, it was worth it. Emily finally found her voice. She crossed her arms, still frowning, but her eyes softened. "Dad, why didn't you tell us?" I shrugged, playing it cool. "Because you told me this trip wasn't for people like me. And I wanted to prove something, not just to you, but to myself. I'm not done living yet, Emily. Not by a long shot." The room went quiet. I could see the guilt flicker across her face, the realization sinking in. She had underestimated me, written me off, and now here I was, standing taller than ever. Jacob broke the silence with a grin. "Well, looks like the old man just showed us all up. Guess we're going to have to keep up with him now." Even Brian chuckled, shaking his head. Presidential suite. Of course, Emily's expression softened into something I hadn't seen in years, respect. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Dad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. I guess I forgot how strong you really are." I smiled. "It's okay, Emily. You're not the first person to think gray hair means weakness. But let me tell you, age isn't the end of adventure. Sometimes it's just the beginning." We spent that first afternoon together in my suite, sharing food from the balcony and laughing like old times. Lily splashed in the infinity pool while Jacob snapped photos of the view. For once, the roles were reversed. They were looking at me with awe, not the other way around. And as the Hawaiian sun set, painting the sky in fiery reds and golds, I leaned back in my chair and watched my family. For the first time in years, they didn't see me as a burden or a shadow of my younger self. They saw me as I truly was, their father, their grandfather, their equal, and a man who refused to be left behind. The first night in Maui, after the shock wore off, something shifted in the air. At first, everyone tiptoed around me, like they weren't sure how to act. Emily barely spoke during dinner, and Brian kept pouring me drinks, as if to make up for his part in the whispers I had overheard back home. Jacob, though, he couldn't stop laughing. Every few minutes he'd glance at me, shake his head and chuckle. Dad in the presidential suite, unreal. But it was Lily who made the night feel normal again. She curled up on my lap as the ocean breeze drifted through the open balcony doors. With a cookie in her hand and crumbs on her chin, she whispered, "I'm glad you're here, Grandpa. It wouldn't have been fun without you, that little voice." It reminded me why I had done all this. Not to make a grand statement, not to rub it in my children's faces, but to be there for her. To make sure she remembered me not as someone left behind, but as someone who showed up. The days that followed turned into something I'll carry with me forever. On the second morning, Jacob convinced me to join him for a hike up a volcanic trail. Emily raised an eyebrow when I laced up my sneakers. "Dad, it's a steep one." "Are you sure?" I grinned. "Let's find out." The climb was tough, I won't lie. My legs burned, sweat poured down my back, and there were moments when my breath came shallow. But when I reached the top, standing beside my son with the world of blue ocean and green cliffs sprawling below us, I felt something powerful. Not just pride, not just relief, but proof. Proof that I was still capable. Jacob slapped me on the back, laughing. "Guess the old man's tougher than we thought." Later in the week, I joined Emily and Brian for snorkeling. I hadn't put on a mask and fins since Carol and I swam in Florida years ago. As I floated over coral reefs with schools of fish darting below me, I felt more alive than I had in decades. When I surfaced, Emily was there beside me, treading water. She pulled off her mask, her face flushed with sun and salt water. "Dad," she said softly, "I was wrong. You don't slow us down, you make it better." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was real, and it was enough. The presidential suite became our gathering place. At night, we'd sit on the balcony, sharing food and telling stories. Lily would fall asleep on a lounge chair, wrapped in a blanket, while Jacob recounted childhood memories we hadn't talked about in years. Emily would roll her eyes but smile, and Brian would raise a glass to me, quietly acknowledging the respect he hadn't given before. By the end of the trip, something had changed. My family didn't look at me as a burden anymore. They saw me as part of the adventure, someone who could still contribute, still surprise them, still inspire them. And for me, the trip wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. About reminding myself that life doesn't stop when your hair goes gray or when your knees ache in the morning. Life keeps going as long as you're willing to keep stepping into it. On our final night in Maui, as we watched the sun sink into the Pacific, Emily sat beside me. She didn't say much, just slipped her arm through mine and leaned her head on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of everything unspoken, the apology, the respect, the love. I whispered mostly to myself, "Your mom would have loved this." Emily squeezed my arm gently. "She'd be proud of you, Dad." When the trip ended and we boarded the plane back home, I carried more than souvenirs in my bag. I carried a renewed sense of who I was. Not just a retired teacher. Not just an old widower, not just Grandpa. I was still Michael Grant. A man who could book his own flight, climb his own mountain, and remind his family, and maybe anyone watching, that age doesn't define adventure. So here's the lesson I want to leave you with. Don't ever let someone else's idea of your limits become your reality. If they tell you you're too old, too weak, too late, prove them wrong. Book the flight. Take the risk. Live the story. Because life isn't about how many years you've had. It's about how many moments you're still brave enough to seize. And if I can seize mine, so can you. So that was my story. A trip to Hawaii that wasn't supposed to include me, but turned out to be the adventure that changed everything. My family learned that I wasn't ready to sit in the shadows, and I learned that sometimes you have to write yourself back into the story, no matter what anyone says. If you've ever been told you're too old, too late, or not good enough, I hope my story shows you that those words don't have to define you. You're capable of more than people give you credit for, and sometimes more than you give yourself credit for. Life doesn't end when people expect it to. It keeps going as long as you keep showing up. Now, before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever proved someone wrong when they underestimated you? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit that like button so more people can hear stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs a little reminder that it's never too late for adventure. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for spending this time with me. Until next time, remember, don't wait for permission to live your life. Go out and create the moments you'll never forget.